Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to synthesize the sources, the research, interviews, guides, really distill it all into the knowledge you need.
Yeah, exactly. And today, we've got a pretty critical mission, I think.
We do. We're diving deep into those, well, hidden forces that genuinely shape your financial destiny.
And hidden is the key word, right?
Yeah.
Because our whole point today is to get you thinking beyond the spreadsheets, beyond the calculators.
Right.
We're pulling together insights from, well, the whole field of behavioral finance, plus expert interviews, commentary, all to hammer home one core idea for you listening: financial success.
Yeah.
It's rarely about being the smartest person in the room or knowing complex formulas.
Okay, so if it's not the math, then what is it? What really drives it?
It's mostly internal stuff. Your financial outcome, it really hinges almost completely on how well you manage your emotions, how you control your biases, whether you can keep that long-term view,
Uh-huh.
and defining risk in a way that actually fits with your values. The skills you need, they're much more psychological, behavioral than, technical number crunching.
I find that kind of freeing, but honestly also a bit daunting, because we all like to think we're rational, but then money gets involved and, well.
Yeah, it changes things.
So our sources today lean heavily on behavioral finance. Before we really unpack the mechanics of building wealth, maybe let's just nail down what this field actually is for everyone.
Sure. So behavioral finance, it's this really fascinating field that popped up where psychology meets traditional economics. Classic economics kind of assumes that everyone is perfectly rational.
Right, the old Homo economicus, the logical
Virginia.
robot making perfect choices.
Exactly. And behavioral finance looks at, decades of actual market data, how real people actually did financially, and basically says, nope, that purely rational person doesn't really exist.
Okay.
It recognizes that we humans, well, we systematically deviate from pure logic. We have these cognitive biases, we get swayed by fear, by greed, by our own unique past experiences with money. It's really the study of how our messy human minds grapple with the kind of systematic rules of finance.
And why is understanding that so crucial?
Because money isn't just numbers. Right. It carries this huge emotional weight, this social significance. It's tied up with our status, our feelings of scarcity or abundance from our past, our deepest worries about the future. So by acknowledging these psychological weak spots, we can start to understand why, even brilliant investors or people earning high incomes, even CEOs, sometimes just sabotage their own long-term financial well-being. It gives you a map to spot your own blind spots.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's unpack this. Let's start by looking at what our sources say is maybe the single most powerful, but also least intuitive way to build wealth. Basically, time plus endurance.
Yeah.
Right? Compounding. Everyone learns about it, maybe in school, but truly getting the sheer scale of it feels almost impossible. And I think you nailed it earlier. Our brains are just wired for straight lines, not these crazy exponential curves.
That's exactly the confounding compounding issue. Our intuition, it works linearly. If I say what's 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, your brain goes, okay, 32, easy. Additive growth.
Yeah.
We get that.
Yeah, predictable. Like working more hours gets you more pay, sort of directly.
Right. But if I ask what's 8 times 8 times 8 times 8, 8 to the power of 4, most people kind of stall. The answer is 4,096. It's just absurdly bigger.
Whoa.
Compounding multiplies growth on top of growth. It's multiplicative, not additive. And because that growth fuels more growth, the final number just explodes upwards in a way that's really hard to picture intuitively. We just underestimate it because we can't easily track it in our heads beyond maybe the second or third step.
So this disconnect, the sort of mental block with exponential growth,
Yeah.
it means the biggest factor in building serious wealth isn't necessarily hitting home runs every year with massive returns. It's just duration, sticking around long enough for that nonlinear math to really kick in.
The numbers really prove it. Take Warren Buffett. We always hear about him being the greatest investor, right? We focus on his annual returns, which, yeah, they're great, like 22% a year on average.
Yeah.
But if you look at his total net worth over time, the numbers are just staggering because of the time. Get this. Out of his, say, $84.5 billion net worth, about $81.5 billion of that piled up after his 65th birthday.
Wait, seriously, so if he had retired at like 60, he'd have been wealthy, sure, but
Yeah.
we probably wouldn't even be talking about him like this.
Probably not. And something like $84.2 billion of his total came after his 50th birthday? Why? It's not like he suddenly became a drastically better investor after 65.
Right.
It's because the base amount of money he was compounding on was just so huge by then that the nonlinear growth finally hit that steep, almost vertical part of the curve.
Yeah.
And the only way you get there is by surviving, by enduring.
That's a really critical distinction. His success isn't just about genius stock picks. It's fundamentally about staying in the game, surviving decades of crashes, downturns, wars, whatever, without getting wiped out and always having capital ready for the next upswing.
And time works its magic, even on tiny amounts saved consistently. One source laid this out really nicely. If you save just $1 a day, starting at age 18 all the way to 65, and you get, let's say, a pretty average market return, maybe 8%, you'd end up with over $400,000.
From $1 a day, wow. And if you bump that up just a little, say $5 a day, like the cost of a fancy coffee.
Then you're looking at nearly $2 million by retirement. The initial effort feels small, but the sheer length of time just maximizes that exponential power.
It really is like returns to the power of time.
Totally. If
Yeah.
you can only boost your return by 1% a year, okay, that helps a bit. But if you can add another 10 or 20 years to your investing timeline, the difference in the end result is exponentially bigger. You want to focus on maximizing that time variable, not obsessing over squeezing out an extra 0.5% return each month.
Which leads perfectly into this idea of endurance as a strategy, aiming to just be average for an above average amount of time. That really feels like the core idea behind why passive index investing works so well for so many people.
It's absolutely key, especially for avoiding those behavioral traps we'll get into. The goal isn't to be a genius, it's just longevity.
Yeah.
There's that famous story from Howard Marks, the investor,
Yeah.
about some colleague who, never ranked in the top half of investors in any single year. Just consistently mediocre year after year.
Okay.
But because he never blew up, never took crazy risks, just stuck with his strategy over a 20-year period, he ended up in the top 4% of all investors.
Wow. So he wasn't the star player. He was just the one who finished the game. Everyone else chasing those big yearly gains, they couldn't keep it up. Either lost too much money or just got exhausted and quit.
That's exactly it. Their high-risk approaches eventually took them out of the game, and that's precisely why simple index funds are so effective for most of us.
Yeah.
See, market returns tend to be very tail-driven, meaning that in any given decade, a tiny handful of stocks, recently it's been the big tech names like the FAANGs plus NVIDIA. They account for almost all the overall market gains. If you didn't happen to pick those few massive winners, your chances of beating the average are actually pretty slim.
And index funds basically guarantee you own those winners, those oddballs, without needing a crystal ball to predict them ahead of time.
Right. It takes the prediction effort out of it, which is crucial. Because investing, it's one of the very few things in life where statistically, the harder you try, the more you trade, the more you research individual stocks, the more you tinker, the worse you tend to do, especially for individual investors.
That's so counterintuitive.
I know. Study after study shows this negative correlation between effort and results for active retail traders. So the beauty of index funds is that leave-it-alone aspect. It stops us from constantly meddling, which usually just racks up trading costs and leads to bad timing.
So the skill for endurance is almost doing nothing. But that raises a really interesting point. Getting rich versus staying rich. Sounds like they need totally different approaches, different mindsets.
Oh, completely different worlds. Getting rich. That often takes real boldness, maybe some audacious risk-taking, starting a business that might totally fail, like Bill Gates did with Microsoft. That's aggression, vision, maybe a bit of luck.
Right.
Staying rich, that demands the opposite. Intense conservatism. Almost paranoia, actually.
Yeah.
And a deep, deep sense of humility about predicting the future.
But what's fascinating thinking about someone like Gates is they often seem to have both gears at once. He took that massive world-changing risk with Microsoft.
Yeah, huge entrepreneurial swing.
But at the same time, he was apparently obsessed with Microsoft having a rock-solid balance sheet.
That's the ultimate example. It's like the perfect barbell strategy.
Yeah.
While taking that huge aggressive bet on software dominating the world, he simultaneously insisted that Microsoft always keep enough cash on hand to pay every single employee for a full year, even if revenues went to zero for 12 months straight.
Wow. That's incredibly conservative.
Radically conservative.
Yeah.
Especially alongside a radically aggressive business plan. It was all about ensuring that no single market downturn, no matter how bad, could force them out of the game. That blend of hyper-aggression for growth and absolute defense for survival, that's incredibly rare and incredibly powerful.
So the big takeaway from this first part seems to be, if you want those exponential results that compounding offers, you need patience and humility above all else. And those are psychological traits, not math skills.
Exactly. And those very virtues are constantly under attack from our own internal wiring, which brings us right into the inner game, the mental roadblocks.
Okay, so we've established the power of time and just sticking with it. But now we need to talk about the internal stuff that threatens to cut that time short. Our sources really stress that no matter how solid your financial plan looks on paper, our own brains are constantly working against us, against that nice exponential curve. We kind of live under this illusion that we're rational decision makers.
Absolutely. We're prone to these systematic errors in thinking, cognitive biases, and behavioral finance basically says these are the main culprits that destroy long-term financial plans. The math part is often secondary to these mental hurdles.
Right. Let's break down some of the big ones our sources highlight. First up, overconfidence bias.
Oh yeah, overconfidence is everywhere, especially studies show among men and people with higher education, ironically. It's as a fundamental belief that you know more than you do, or that you're better at predicting the market than, the average person, or even professionals.
And how does that hurt you?
It leads directly to things like trading too much, constantly buying and selling because you think you've got the edge. But as we just talked about, more trading usually means higher costs, commissions, taxes, and those costs chip away directly at your returns, slowly killing that compounding effect. It's like a psychological weapon aimed right at undermining your endurance.
Makes sense. And that seems to pair perfectly with the next one, confirmation bias.
Totally. Confirmation bias is where you actively seek out information that confirms what you already believe or the decisions you've already made, and you subconsciously ignore evidence that contradicts it.
So if I bought stock X, I only read the good news about stock X.
Exactly. You click on the headline saying StockX to the moon,
Mm-hmm.
and you scroll right past the article warning about its declining market share. So when things do turn bad, you're caught completely off guard because you've built this echo chamber around your decision. It creates huge blind spots.
Okay. Then there's the anchoring effect. I feel like I see this one shopping all the time.
Yeah, it's super common. Anchoring is when you latch onto the first piece of information you get and let it overly influence subsequent decisions. In investing, say you bought a stock at $100, it then drops to $50.
Right.
You might anchor your idea of its true value back to that $100 you paid. So it becomes really hard to objectively decide if it's actually a good buy at $50 now, or if you should cut your losses. You're stuck on that initial price point, ignoring the current reality.
Got it. And we definitely can't skip mental accounting. This feels like one of those everyday things people do without even realizing it's, well, kind of erratic.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
Mental accounting is basically putting money into different imaginary buckets in your head
Yeah.
and treating those buckets differently.
Yeah.
The classic example, you get a $5,000 tax refund,
Nice.
and you immediately think, great, found money, vacation time, or you splurge on something fun. Because mentally, that's windfall money or play money. But at the same time, maybe you're carrying a $5,000 balance on a credit card charging you 18% interest. Logically, rationally, you should take that found money and wipe out that high-interest debt immediately. But the mental buckets stop you. Refund money is for fun. Debt money is something else.
Even though it's all just money, dollars are dollars.
Exactly. But our brain doesn't treat it that way. That's the irrationality.
Okay, so beyond these biases, which are sort of errors in thinking, there are also just raw emotions acting as financial triggers, actively messing with our long-term plans. We got to talk about the cost of fear and greed.
Oh, absolutely. And the timing is usually terrible. Like fear and anxiety, they kick in and make you defensive, but typically at the worst possible moment, right when the market's already down.
So you sell low?
Exactly. That fear makes people panic sell near the bottom, locking in losses and guaranteeing they miss the eventual recovery. Or it just paralyzes them, preventing them from taking smart, calculated risks needed for growth, like buying when things are cheap.
And the flip side, greed and euphoria also tends to hit at exactly the wrong time too, right?
Yep. When the market's been roaring for years, everything looks easy, headlines are screaming about making quick fortunes, that's when euphoria takes over. People get greedy, they start taking excessive risks, maybe borrowing money to invest, buying into speculative bubbles without really understanding them.
Setting themselves up for a big fall when the music stops.
Precisely. They get wiped out in the correction because they got swept up in the mania. And these emotions don't just happen in isolation. They feed on the crowd, on what everyone else seems to be doing, which just makes the whole cycle more extreme and costly for individuals.
And then there are maybe quieter, more personal emotions like guilt and shame. How do they play in?
Well, maybe you feel guilty after an impulse buy, or ashamed about a past financial mistake. And sometimes that leads to an overcorrection. Like someone feels so bad about splurging that they become overly frugal, super restrictive.
To the point where it hurts them.
Yeah, maybe they start avoiding necessary things, like going to the doctor, or skipping important social events with friends because they feel they don't deserve to spend the money. They end up making themselves miserable, even if they're actually financially okay.
Right.
It's another way emotions mess with rational well-being.
So the way through all this, according to our sources, seems to involve rethinking what risk even means, moving away from some universal academic definition and making it intensely personal.
Exactly. Risk, when you boil it down, is just anything that could stop you from reaching your specific personal financial goals. So what's risky really depends on your situation and your timeline.
Right.
Think about market volatility, like a stock suddenly dropping 20%.
Hmm.
For a day trader using leverage, that's a massive, potentially catastrophic risk. They might get a margin call, get wiped out. But for you, maybe listening in your 20s or 30s, saving for retirement 40 or 50 years away, that same 20% drop is, well, it's mostly just noise. It doesn't really affect your long-term plan. In fact, if you're still adding money, a drop is actually an opportunity to buy more shares cheaper. The risk is totally different depending on the person.
So step one is stop comparing your risk tolerance to someone else's. And that leads to this really powerful psychological trick, or reframing,
Hmm.
thinking of volatility not as a fine, but as a fee.
Yes. This mental shift is absolutely crucial for building that endurance we talked about. Most investors, when the market drops, they feel like they're being punished, like they got a fine for doing something wrong.
Which triggers guilt, maybe panic.
Right. It feels like failure. And that feeling is a huge barrier to just accepting that markets go up and down. It's inherent.
But if you reframe it as a fee,
Then it's just the price of admission. It's the cost you pay for the chance to earn those potentially higher long-term returns that equities offer compared to safer assets. It's like buying a theme park ticket. You know, you'll probably have to wait in lines, maybe it'll be crowded, maybe a ride breaks down,
yeah.
but you pay the fee willingly because you expect the overall experience, the fun rides, the memories, to be worth it. Volatility is the fee you pay for playing the compounding game. If you accept it as just paying the market's fee for that year, you're way less likely to freak out and sell at the bottom. You just acknowledge, okay, paid the fee this year, and move on.
That reframing alone feels like it could dramatically change your behavior and really shore up that endurance we need. Okay, so if we accept that the real goal isn't just racking up the highest possible number on a spreadsheet, but maybe something more like happiness or security, then we need to talk about what the money is actually for. And this means getting really clear on the difference between being rich and being truly wealthy. Our sources draw a super sharp line here.
Yeah, it's a critical distinction that society often gets completely backwards. Being rich, that's mostly about visible stuff. It's having enough income, or more often enough credit, to afford the things people can see, the big house payment, the fancy car lease, the expensive watch. Richness is often tied to ego, to signaling status.
It's about showing off what you can buy, or maybe what you can borrow to buy.
Exactly. And often it's heavily reliant on debt.
Hmm.
True wealth, on the other hand, that's the money you don't see. It's the savings, the investments quietly compounding in brokerage accounts, the assets that provide actual freedom, independence, autonomy. Wealth is almost always invisible. It's the hidden part of the iceberg.
Which creates this huge role model problem, right? Because society tends to look up to person with the mansion and the brand new luxury car, the visibly rich person.
Right, they're displaying all the culturally recognized signals of success.
But as our sources warn again and again, that person might be leveraged up to their eyeballs, living paycheck to paycheck, just to make the payments on all that visible stuff. They might be one missed bonus or one market dip away from serious financial trouble.
Meanwhile, the truly wealthy person,
Yeah.
the one with genuine financial independence, they might be completely invisible. They could be the person in the modest paid-off house driving a 10-year-old reliable car. Their assets aren't on display, so their successful habits, saving and investing patiently, avoiding status spending, are much harder for others to see and copy.
You know, the classic example that just perfectly illustrates this is Ronald Reed, the janitor.
Oh, yeah. Incredible story. Ronald Reed worked as a janitor and a gas station attendant his whole life, lived incredibly frugally, nobody suspected a thing.
Yeah.
And then he died, and it turned out he'd quietly amassed an $8 million fortune, mostly through just buying and holding blue-chip stocks for decades and reinvesting the dividends. He left most of it to his local library and hospital.
He was the absolute definition of invisible wealth. He bought functional things, ignored status completely, and just maximized his time in the market, letting compounding do its work.
Exactly. He used money purely as a tool to achieve independence, even if he didn't dramatically change his lifestyle. And that really gets to the core of what money's ultimate value is: independence.
I love the phrase one source used. Money is the oxygen of independence. That hits hard because it's not about the stuff you can buy, it's about the things you don't have to do.
Precisely. What most people really truly want deep down isn't another fancy car. It's the ability to control their own time, to spend time with people they care about, when they want, for as long as they want, to wake up in the morning and have real choices about how they spend their day without financial pressure forcing them into a job they hate or a situation they despise. Money buys options. It minimizes the terror of the worst-case scenario.
Which also sheds light on that purchase paradox, the idea that buying bigger, fancier things doesn't automatically make you happier. Like a new, bigger house might bring some happiness.
Right, but it's probably not the house itself. It's more likely that the house enables activities that lead to happiness. Maybe it has a great kitchen for cooking with family, or a nice yard for the kids to play in,
Yeah.
or a quiet space where you can finally invite friends over comfortably.
So if you optimize just for status, you buy the biggest, most impressive house you can possibly afford, maybe stretching yourself thin.
But if you optimize for happiness or independence, you might buy a smaller, more manageable house that allows for those desired activities, but also leaves you with less financial stress and more money to save or spend on experiences.
But the moment money stops being a tool for independence and starts being a measuring stick for status, that's when you fall into that trap of the moving goalposts, which sounds like a guaranteed recipe for unhappiness.
Oh, it absolutely is. That's where the real trouble starts. Happiness can kind of be thought of as your results minus your expectations. So let's say your investments do great. Your net worth goes up 10% this year. That's objectively good. But if your expectations are contrarily bolligos, what you feel you should have, maybe based on what your neighbors have or what you see on social media, if your expectations went up by 12%, you actually feel worse. You feel like you're falling behind, even though you're objectively doing well. You're constantly chasing a target that keeps moving further away.
And that fuels the status irony, sometimes called the man in the car paradox, where people buy really expensive things, like, say, a Ferrari,
Right. Classic status symbol.
specifically hoping to get admiration and respect from onlookers. Wow, look at that guy. He must be important, successful.
But the irony is when you see a Ferrari drive by, what do you usually think? Do you admire the specific person driving it, who you probably can't even see clearly?
No. Usually I just think, wow, cool car. I wish I had a Ferrari.
Exactly. The spectator rarely focuses on the driver. They use the car as a prop to imagine themselves having that level of wealth or success. So you buy the expensive thing seeking validation, but you just end up being an anonymous backdrop for somebody else's daydream. The admiration you crave doesn't actually land on you.
And when using wealth purely for status becomes the main goal, history shows it can end disastrously, not just psychologically, but financially too. We have to talk about the Vanderbilts here, right?
Oh, the Vanderbilts are the ultimate cautionary tale. Cornelius Vanderbilt, the Commodore, built this colossal fortune in the 19th century railroads. Shipping worth something like $400 billion in today's dollars. An absolutely ruthless and effective wealth builder.
Right, one of the richest people in history.
But that entire dynasty's fortune, basically gone within just 3 generations, completely dissipated.
How on earth does that happen? A fortune that big feels like it should last forever.
It got destroyed because the heirs were basically raised with one core belief. Their purpose in life was to spend more money more conspicuously than anyone else as proof of their elite status.
Oh.
They got locked into this escalating war of social one-upmanship, building these gigantic competing Gilded Age mansions in Newport like the Breakers, Marble House. These weren't really comfortable homes. They were stages for displaying wealth. They threw these insanely extravagant balls and parties that became sources of immense stress and obligation. Keeping up with and outdoing the previous generation became their entire identity.
So they were obsessed with being visibly rich and completely lost the skills or the mindset needed for preserving actual wealth and independence.
And by all accounts, many of them were deeply unhappy, trapped in this cycle. By the time you get to the 4th generation, the family fortune was essentially gone. They had to sell off the grand estates their parents and grandparents had built. It's the ultimate warning. Use money primarily as a scorecard for status, and you're likely to lose both the money and your well-being.
This kind of intense pressure that comes with visible wealth also brings this invisible burden our sources call social debt.
Yeah, social debt is a really important concept. It's that often unspoken psychological and financial pressure that builds up as your income or wealth grows. Pressure to constantly upgrade your lifestyle, move to a better neighborhood, drive a nicer car, and maybe most significantly, pressure to financially support extended family, friends, maybe people from your old neighborhood in ways that might stretch you thin or aren't really sustainable long term.
You often hear about this with like pro athletes signing their first big contract. Suddenly everyone expects handouts. But it's not just a thing for the super rich, is it?
Oh, not at all.
Yeah.
It's incredibly common, maybe even more insidious, in the upper middle class.
Yeah.
It's that pressure to keep up with the Joneses, but the Joneses keep getting richer too.
Yeah.
Leasing the new BMW because everyone else on the block just got one. Taking those expensive family trips to Europe because your colleagues are posting their pictures. Constantly renovating the house, not because you need the changes, but because it's just what's expected in your social circle to signal you're still making it. This stuff becomes an invisible liability, constantly eating away at the money you could be saving and compounding.
It's like this natural gravitational pull towards higher spending as your income rises. You need active, conscious effort, real discipline to resist that pull and keep your lifestyle from inflating alongside your paycheck.
Exactly. And that discipline gets harder because your own expectations tend to rise too. There's a great analogy called the quiet car analogy.
Okay.
You know how on a train, if you choose to sit in the designated quiet car, your expectation is for near total silence.
Yeah, definitely.
Because that expectation is so high, even the tiniest noise, someone's phone vibrating gently, a soft cough, feels incredibly jarring and annoying. Way more annoying than it would feel in a regular train car.
Okay, I see where you're going. Increased wealth creates a similar pressure for like a perfect, problem-free life.
Precisely. As your wealth grows, so does your expectation for comfort, smoothness, and a lack of problems. Which means that normal, everyday life hassles, the dishwasher breaking, a flight delay, kids misbehaving can feel disproportionately stressful or upsetting. Money might have removed the hope that if only I had more money, these problems would vanish. But now you have the money, and the problems are still there. And that can lead to a surprising amount of anxiety or disappointment.
So if the ultimate aim is really independence and maybe peace of mind rather than just the biggest number, then we have to accept that sometimes the best money decision isn't the one that looks smartest on a spreadsheet. This is where the personal part of personal finance really takes over.
Absolutely. This is really the heart of behavioral finance in practice, acknowledging that trade-off between, pure mathematical optimization and what actually helps you sleep at night.
Let's use the mortgage payoff example. This comes up a lot, especially for listeners who are probably pretty analytical and comfortable with numbers.
Right. So one source we looked at shared their personal story of paying off their mortgage early, even though it had a really low fixed interest rate, something like 3.2%.
Okay, mathematically, that looks questionable.
Totally. On a spreadsheet, that was probably the worst financial decision they ever made because the opportunity cost was huge. They could have taken that extra money they were throwing at the 3.2% mortgage and invested in the market, potentially earning, 8%, 10%, maybe more over the long run. The math screams, don't do it.
Right. Keep the cheap debt, invest the difference.
But psychologically, the person described it as the absolute best money decision they ever made. Wiping out that mortgage debt brought them this immense sense of relief and happiness. It dramatically reduced their anxiety about worst-case scenarios like losing a job and not being able to afford shelter. It improved their quality of life, their sleep, everything. They optimized for psychological well-being and long-term peace of mind, not just maximizing every last potential dollar of return.
So how do we help someone listening reconcile that? How do you weigh the psychological win against the potential dollars left on the table according to the spreadsheet?
Well, it comes back to self-awareness. You have to be really honest with yourself about what role you want money to play in your life.
Yeah.
Is its primary purpose to maximize future wealth above all else? Or is its primary purpose to provide security, reduce anxiety, and enable a certain quality of life today? If freedom from worry is your top priority, then paying off that low-interest mortgage might be a perfectly rational decision for you, even if it's mathematically suboptimal. If aggressive growth is your main goal, and you can mentally handle the leverage, then investing the difference is rational for you. There's no single right answer. It has to fit your personality, your risk tolerance, your life goals. Personal finance is way more personal than it is finance.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, lastly, let's touch on something crucial. How we pass on healthy attitudes about wealth and values to the next generation. Because that seems key to breaking that cycle of status chasing we talked about.
Yeah, super important. And that famous quote from Warren Buffett really sets the stage perfectly. Leave your kids enough money so they feel they can do anything, but not so much that they feel they can do nothing.
Right. Give them a tailwind, maybe some options, but don't burden them with so much that they lack purpose or drive.
Exactly. The goal is empowerment, not entitlement. And the tricky part is, it's usually not the money itself that causes problems for kids. It's the parents' attitude towards money, the values they model, that often leads to spoiled or entitled adults.
So the real danger isn't just giving them money, it's teaching them, maybe implicitly, that money is the main way we measure people's worth.
That's the absolute core risk.
Yeah.
If kids grow up hearing their parents constantly talk about how much the neighbor makes, or judge people based on the car they drive, or equate high income with being a good or valuable person, they absorb that lesson. They learn that net worth is the ultimate scorecard for human value. And that, according to our sources, is probably the most toxic financial lesson you could possibly teach.
So maybe sitting them down for formal lessons on budgeting or compounding is less important than just leading by example.
Oh, far more important. Kids have incredibly sensitive antennas for hypocrisy. They see how you react to financial stress. They hear how you talk about other people's money. They observe what you prioritize with your own spending and saving. Demonstrating patience, showing reasonable frugality, admitting when you don't know something, and crucially, showing humility. Those actions speak way louder than any lecture about asset allocation.
And if there's one single value that's most critical to instill when it comes to money,
It's probably this. Never, ever teach your kids that all poverty is just laziness, or that all wealth is purely down to hard work. Make sure they understand the huge role that luck, timing, where you were born, who your parents were, all play in financial outcomes.
mm,
Help them decouple someone's bank balance from their inherent worth as a human being. That's the best inoculation against getting sucked into that destructive status game later in life.
wow. We've covered a ton of ground here. We started with that counterintuitive power of compounding in time.
Yeah, then move through all the ways our own minds, biases, emotions try to sabotage that process.
Right, ended up talking about the real goals, independence, avoiding status traps, and the psychology behind it all. But that core lesson feels constant. Your own mindset, your behavior, that's the biggest financial lever you actually control.
Exactly. We wanted to help you look past those flashy, superficial signs of being rich, the visible stuff, often fueled by debt, and really focus on the deeper, usually invisible mechanics of building true wealth, which boils down to independence, control over your time, autonomy.
And the skills needed aren't fancy math. They're endurance, patience, and a whole lot of humility, especially when it comes to managing your own expectations.
Those are the psychological muscles you need to build to win this behavioral game over the long run.
So hopefully you, the listener, now have some better tools, not just to, run the numbers on your potential financial future, but maybe more importantly, to manage those internal forces, your own psychology, that will ultimately determine whether you stick with it long enough to succeed or get derailed along the way.
And maybe here's a final thought to chew on, kind of building on that idea of social debt we discussed. If accumulating wealth often brings this invisible pressure to conform, to spend more, to support others, think about this. What unacknowledged social debt might you be carrying right now that's holding you back from achieving the level of radical independence you truly desire? And what level of financial freedom would you actually need to shed that burden completely and start defining your life purely on your own terms?
That's a powerful question to sit with. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We look forward to exploring the next topic with you soon.